When I was growing up, I didn't want to be Mexican. I wanted to be like the other kids living in Santa Monica Canyon. There was a lot of prejudice in those days. Some of the mothers didn't want their kids playing with me. You feel this, and there's nothing you can do about it. You just live with it. When I grew up as an adult, I realized that what an important background I have. The reason why I started collecting was to get information, documents, and papers and photographs of my family. So I went to the library, got history books about Santa Monica and Los Angeles. Couldn't find anything about our rancho in them. The historians completely ignored our family and our rancho for some reason. If there was some mention of it, there might have been a paragraph or two, but that was about all. 175 years ago, land was available to practically anybody that wanted it. They could ask for it and they'd give it to them because Spain and Mexico wanted to occupy the land. The only way they could get the land was to give it to them. My great-grandfather was born in Guadalajara, Mexico. He was 26 years old when he came to Los Angeles. In 1839, he was living as a neighbor to Francisco Reyes, so they knew each other because they were neighbors. Isidro's uncle had the land grant Rancho Boca de Santa Monica. They didn't want it anymore. So he asked my great-grandfathers if they wanted it, and they said yes. So they gave it to them. And then they applied to the Mexican government for the title to the land grant. And in order to get that, you had to be a Mexican citizen. You have to be a person of good character. You had to embrace the Catholic faith. You had to grow fruit trees on the land, and you had to have 200 head of cattle. So you didn't buy it in those days. Francisco built his adobe house in Santa Monica Canyon on the upper mesa. Isidro Reyes built his house on Huntington Palisades near Sunset Boulevard. And when the United States took over and the land was partitioned among all the heirs of Francisco Marquez, and each one knew what portion of land was theirs, they had to pay taxes on them. When you had large parcels of land, that was a lot of money. And my ancestors weren't working. They didn't have a job. They didn't have an income. So the taxes were a liability. So what was easiest? Get rid of the land, so you don't have to pay the taxes. I originally started looking for photos of the Rancho period because I was writing the history of the Rancho and of my family, and I wanted pictures of it, and discovered that there wasn't any. But along the way, found these other images of Los Angeles, Santa Monica, Redondo Beach. You see something and you know you don't have it and you want it. And you get it by any means, But I had to buy things without telling my wife I spent the money. I would bring the item home, bought it on impulse, and take it out to my room in the garage and put it away. We were struggling. We didn't have a lot of money. but I was spending it on stuff that made me happy, but it had nothing to do with the family. And when I aged, it was clear to me that I had to do something. I didn't want to die and leave this collection. So I decided, I called the Huntington and asked Jenny Watts if she was interested, and she said, of course. And she came over and looked at it, and they decided they would take it. And I was delighted because I couldn't think of any place else I'd rather have the collection. As I read the books published about the land grants, they were all written by history professors. And I realized after reading those books that there wasn't a family that retained the land as long as ours did. There's two parcels still remaining of the rancho. One is my cousin. She lives on the land, Rancho Boca de Santa Monica, and I own our family cemetery in Santa Monica Canyon. That's still in the family, and it will probably remain so forever, you know. This is a photograph taken of a cemetery in 1908, showing what it looked like in those days. And you can still see part of the ruins of the original adobe house here. And the big crosses, my grandmother, who is buried here, Michaela Reyes, and 7th Street Hill is coming down. But it was all empty land. There were no houses or anything here when the cemetery was established. It was built or established right next door to the house that they were living in. We believe there's about 34 people buried here. We determined that by scientists from the Coaching Institute at UCLA came out with a radar ground penetration. And these little flags that you see on the ground here are from forensic dogs who came and could sniff the ground, and they could determine whether there's human remains still in the ground. So that's how we got the estimate. We know the names of the persons that died, but we don't know where they're buried. I plan to mark the graves with crosses that I'm making myself out of materials that I think you would find in the rancho back in those days, made out of rocks and branches of trees, and anything that would resemble, or you could think of the rancho by looking at the crosses. I've been working on these crosses for about 2 or 3 years, and I'm slowly achieving what I want to do. I should have them all finished by this year sometime. My family deserve to be recognized as the original family in Santa Monica Canyon. They deserve to be recognized as the original family that came to California in 1769. We're not newcomers to California. We were among the founders of California. And I think they deserve to be recognized and remembered for that.